The archives of the Ministry of Revenue were where ambitious men went to die. Located deep beneath the imperial palace, the stone rooms were windowless, perpetually damp, and filled floor to ceiling with decades of rotting tax scrolls, grain requisitions, and provincial tribute logs. For the past 3 weeks it had been my home. In my previous life, I uncovered hidden fortunes and brought down corrupt executives simply by following the trail of their numbers. The tools here were different: heavy ink brushes, delicate rice paper, and wooden abacai instead of complex calculating machines. But the language of numbers remained exactly the same. Fraud always left a footprint. I was currently sitting cross-legged on a woven mat, balancing the salt tax ledgers for the eastern coastal provinces, when the heavy oak doors of the archive were kicked open with enough force to crack the stone doorframe. The 3 elderly scholars working alongside me immediately dropped their brushes and threw themselves to the floor, their foreheads pressed flat against the cold stone. I carefully set my brush down to avoid staining the ledger, rising slowly to my feet. 4 men strode into the dimly lit archive. They wore the dark, crimson-trimmed robes of the Shadow Guards, the Emperor's personal executioners and secret police. At their center was a man who seemed to swallow the light in the room entirely. Commander Lu was terrifyingly striking. He possessed the sharp, unforgiving features of a hawk, his dark hair pulled back into a severe silver guan. A long, curved saber rested at his hip. The air around him was cold, metallic, and completely devoid of mercy. Minister Fong assured me the military grain reports from the northern border were stored here, Commander Lu said, his voice quiet but carrying a lethal edge that made the scholars tremble violently. I require the records from the past 3 winters. The head archivist, a frail man named Master Chan, squeezed his eyes shut. See Commander Lu, 1,000 apologies. The northern border records are vast. They encompass over 4,000 separate bamboo slips and scrolls. To locate and compile the exact winter shipments, it would take our team at least 2 months. Commander Lu's hand rested casually on the hilt of his saber. The sound of his leather gloves sliding against the steel was deafening in the quiet room. I ride for the northern border in 2 days to execute the quartermasters for stealing imperial rations. I need the proof of their theft before I leave. You have until tomorrow dawn. Commander, please. Master Chen wept. It is humanly impossible. The tribute logs are not categorized by season, but by weight and vessel. To cross-reference them all. Excuse me, I said, my voice cutting cleanly through the panic. Commander Lu's dark, piercing eyes snapped toward me. The silence that followed was suffocating. Women were rarely permitted to work in the ministries, and certainly not disgraced daughters of exiled officials. Step back, girl, one of his guards snapped, stepping forward. Commander Lu raised a single finger, halting his guard instantly. He looked at me, a flicker of cold curiosity passing over his sharp features. You have something to say to the Shadow Guard record keeper? Master Chun is correct, I said smoothly, ignoring the frantic, silent pleas of the elderly scholars on the floor. Sorting the logs by vessel to find the winter grain shipments will take months. You are asking the wrong question, Commander. The guard bristled. Insolence. Do you know who you are speaking to? I am speaking to a man who is in a hurry, I replied, keeping my posture perfectly straight. I walked over to the towering shelves on the eastern wall and pulled down a thick, heavy ledger bound in dark leather. I brought it to the center table and unrolled it before him. The northern border is frozen from the 10th month to the 2nd month. Supply vessels cannot travel upriver due to the ice. Commander Lu stepped closer to the table, his tall frame towering over me. I could smell the faint scent of cold steel and sandalwood. Continue. If they cannot travel by river, the grain must be transported over land via ox-drawn carts, I explained, tapping the column of characters I had memorized 2 days ago. If the quartermasters are stealing grain during the winter, they aren't altering the grain manifests. That is too obvious. They are altering the transport budgets. They are billing the emperor for the rental and feeding of 500 oxen, when they are only using 300. I reached for my wooden abacus. My fingers flew across the beads with a rapid rhythmic clacking sound. If you want to find your missing grain, Commander, do not look for missing rice, I said, sliding the final bead into place and pointing to the final sum. Look at the hay. Specifically, the requisition of fodder in the Hebei province. I can give you the exact discrepancy, the names of the transport merchants involved, and the precise amount of silver they skimmed from the treasury. Commander Lu stared at the abacus, then slowly raised his dark eyes to meet mine. The terrifying, murderous aura surrounding him shifted into something far more dangerous. Profound, absolute intrigue. "How long will it take you to compile the names?" he asked, his voice dropping an octave. "Bring me a pot of strong black tea and a lamp with extra oil," I said, sitting back down on my woven mat and pulling a fresh sheet of rice paper toward me. "I will have your traders listed by midnight." Chapter 2. The archive was as silent as a tomb, save for the frantic rhythmic clack-clack-clack of wooden beads sliding across the rods of my abacus. The elderly scholars had fled the basement hours ago, terrified by the mere presence of the Emperor's executioners. Only Commander Lu and his second-in-command remained. The guard stood rigidly by the heavy oak doors, hand resting on his blade. Commander Lu, however, had not moved from the center of the room. He stood near my low table, watching my hands fly across the abacus with an unblinking predatory stillness. True to my request, a steaming pot of strong black tea and a freshly filled oil lamp sat beside my inkstone. Lu had poured the tea himself. The midnight bell of the palace tolled in the distance, a low, mournful sound that echoed through the stone ceiling. I slid the final bead into place, dipping my brush into the inkstone. I swept the tip across the rice paper in a rapid, fluid motion, finalizing the last column of characters before setting the brush down. I blew softly on the ink to dry it, my shoulders aching from hours of hunching over the low desk. "Finished," I murmured, rubbing my tired eyes. Commander Lu stepped forward, his dark robe swallowing the dim lamplight. He picked up the sheet of rice paper. His sharp eyes scanned the precise columns of names, locations, and sums of stolen silver. "For transport merchants in Hebei," Lu read aloud, his voice a low, dangerous rumble. "And 3 imperial quartermasters. You are certain these are the men?" "The numbers do not lie, Commander," I said, reaching for my teacup. The tea was still warm, a sharp, bitter brew that instantly cleared the fog from my head. The quartermasters claimed they rented 500 ox carts to move the grain over the frozen roads. But if you look at the provincial tallies for winter hay, there was only enough fodder purchased to feed 200 oxen. Lu's eyes narrowed slightly as he traced the ink with a gloved finger. "They built the treasury for carts that did not exist." "Exactly. And they did not transport the grain," I continued, tracing a line on the open ledger with my fingernail. "They sold the imperial rice to private merchants in the capital at a premium, then forged the delivery manifests at the border to claim it arrived safely. The silver from the phantom oxen and the stolen rice was routed back into the capital." I pointed to the final name on the list I had handed him. It was routed specifically to the Jade Pavilion Trading House. "If you raid that merchant house before dawn, you will find your missing military silver." The guard by the door let out a sharp breath. "Commander, the Jade Pavilion is owned by the Minister of Public Works. If we accuse him without absolute proof—" "We have the proof," Lu interrupted, his voice dropping to a terrifying, quiet calm. He folded the rice paper and slipped it into the breast of his dark tunic. He looked down at me, the cold, metallic edge of his aura shifting into something heavy and intensely focused. "Who taught you to read the imperial ledgers with such venom?" I lowered my teacup, keeping my gaze steady against his. "My father was the magistrate of the southern provinces. Before he was exiled, he taught me that a man can hide a lie in his words, but he can never hide a lie in his sums. If you know how to count, you know how to catch them." Recognition flashed in Lu's dark eyes. "Zhao, you are Zhao Rong. Your father was disgraced for supposedly losing 20,000 taels of flood relief silver." "My father was framed by a corrupt provincial governor," I corrected smoothly, though the old familiar anger flared in my chest. "The silver was never lost. It was stolen. But I was stripped of my nobility and sent to this basement before I could finish balancing the ledgers to prove it." Lu stared at me for a long, heavy moment. In the dark, dusty archive, surrounded by the smell of rotting bamboo and old ink, the head of the secret police looked at me not as a lowly record keeper, but as a weapon he had just unearthed. "Pack your brushes, Zhao Rong," Lu commanded, turning toward the heavy oak doors. I blinked, my hand freezing over my abacus. "Pack my brushes? To go where?" "The shadow guards do not leave their most valuable blades to rust in the dark," Commander Lu said, glancing back over his shoulder. A faint, razor-sharp smile touched the corner of his lips. "You no longer belong to the Ministry of Revenue. You belong to me. We have an empire to audit." Chapter 3. The headquarters of the Shadow Guards, known as the Obsidian Pavilion, was not a place where people went willingly. situated in the northernmost corner of the Imperial Palace grounds. It was a fortress of black stone and iron, surrounded by a courtyard where elite executioners sharpened their blades in chilling silence. I stood in the center of that courtyard, clutching my wooden abacus to my chest like a shield, while 24 of the Emperor's most lethal killers stopped their drills to stare at me. I was wearing the faded, ink-stained cotton robes of a low-ranking ministry scribe. They were wearing dark armor practically steeped in blood. "Keep moving," the guard who had escorted me grunted, prodding my shoulder. His name was Lieutenant Gao, the same man who had questioned me in the archive the night before. He clearly did not approve of his commander's new acquisition. The commander does not tolerate tardiness. I did not flinch at the prod. I simply tightened my grip on my abacus and followed him up the black stone steps into the main keep. Lieutenant Gao led me down a series of torch-lit corridors until we reached a set of heavy iron doors. He pushed them open, revealing a vast, surprisingly well-lit chamber. It was a study, but it looked more like a war room. The walls were lined with racks of terrifying weaponry, but the center of the room was dominated by a massive table carved from a single slab of dark ironwood. Piled high upon this table were hundreds of leather-bound ledgers, silk scrolls, and locked wooden lockboxes. Standing by the window, his broad shoulders blocking the morning sun, was Commander Lu. He turned as we entered. He had not slept. He was still wearing his dark, crimson-trimmed robes from the night before, though I noticed a faint dark spray of what looked distinctly like dried blood on the edge of his sleeve. "The raid on the Jade Pavilion was successful," Lu stated, his voice a low, commanding rumble that instantly filled the room. He walked toward the table, resting his gloved hand on a heavy iron lockbox. "We seized the Minister of Public Works before he could flee the capital. We also seized his personal archives." Lieutenant Gao bowed deeply. "Commander, I still must protest. Bringing a disgraced woman into the Obsidian Pavilion." Lu did not raise his voice. He did not even look at his lieutenant. He simply shifted his gaze, cold and heavy as a burial shroud, toward Gao. "Lieutenant," Lu said quietly, "if you ever question my judgment regarding Lady Zhao again, I will have your tongue removed and pinned to the courtyard gates. Are we understood?" The color instantly drained from Gao's face. He dropped to one knee, bowing his head so low it nearly touched the floorboards. "Understood, Commander. Forgive this subordinate." "Leave us," Lu commanded. Gao scrambled to his feet and vanished, pulling the heavy iron doors shut behind him. The sudden silence in the room was absolute. I stood perfectly still, trying to ignore the frantic racing of my heart. Commander Lu was a man who dealt in death. I dealt in sums. The chasm between our worlds was vast, yet the way he looked at me, with that intense, unblinking focus, made the room feel dangerously small. Lu walked around the heavy ironwood table, stopping mere inches in front of me. He looked down at my faded cotton robes, then at the wooden counting frame clutched tightly in my hands. "The basement of the Revenue Ministry is damp," Lu murmured, his gaze dropping to my ink-stained fingers. "And the lighting is poor. I noticed you squinting at the parchment last night." He stepped aside, gesturing toward a smaller desk situated near the large eastern window. The morning light poured over it beautifully. Sitting on the desk was a brand-new inkstone, a row of the finest wolf hairbrushes, a stack of premium unblemished rice paper, and a delicate porcelain teapot resting over a small charcoal warmer. It was a master scribe's workspace. It was perfect. "I require a mind that can see in the dark room," Lu said, using my given name for the first time. The sound of it in his deep, gravelly voice sent a strange shiver down my spine. "You will not strain your eyes in my pavilion. Sit." I moved to the desk, the rich scent of the brewing jasmine tea easing the tension in my shoulders. I set my abacus down and turned to face him. The Minister of Public Works is a powerful man. Confiscating his ledgers is one thing, but proving his treason to the Emperor requires irrefutable sums. "Which is why you are here," Lu said, carrying a stack of seized ledgers from the main table and dropping them heavily onto my new desk. "The minister claims the silver in his vaults is from legitimate silk trade. I need you to prove it is the stolen military silver from the northern border." I pulled the first ledger toward me, untying the leather binding. I picked up a fresh brush, the weight of the fine wood perfectly balanced in my hand. "He will have washed the silver through several merchant houses to hide the origin," I murmured, my eyes already flying down the columns of characters. The numbers began to sing to me, forming patterns and pathways that only I could see. I will need to cross-reference his silk exports with the harbor tax logs. If he claims he sold 10,000 bolts of silk, but the harbor master only taxed 5,000, then the rest of the profit is phantom, Lou finished, his dark eyes gleaming with a lethal predatory satisfaction. He braced his hands on the edge of my desk, leaning in close. The scent of sandalwood and cold iron enveloped me. Bleed him dry, Zhao Rong. Find me every stolen tale. I met his gaze, dipping my brush into the ink. Pour me a cup of tea, Commander. We have a great deal of math to do. Chapter 4. I measured my time not by the sun, but by the burn of cedar incense. I had carved tiny, precise notches into the stick, dividing the morning into rigorous intervals of absolute focus. When the ash hit a notch, I allowed myself to breathe, sip my tea, and stretch my cramped fingers. Until then, the rest of the world ceased to exist. The obsidian pavilion was quiet. The executioners and spies gave my desk a wide berth, treating me with the same wary reverence they afforded a loaded crossbow. Commander Liu, however, did not keep his distance. He sat in a high-backed chair near my workspace, casually polishing the steel of his saber with a dark cloth. He hadn't spoken a word in 2 hours, simply acting as a terrifying, immovable guard dog while I dismantled the Minister of Public Works' entire life. The ash on my incense stick fell past the second notch. I set my brush down, rolling my shoulders. You have found something, Liu said immediately. He didn't look up from his blade, but the shift in his posture was instantaneous. He missed nothing. The minister is a very careful man, but he does not understand the fundamental syntax of numbers, I said, reaching for my teacup. He understands the final sum, but he ignores the structure required to build it. He claims he earned 80,000 taels of silver legitimately by exporting premium winter brocade to the southern merchants. Liu sheathed his saber with a soft metallic snick. But you have found the harbor logs, and the ships did not sail? No, the ships sailed. He even paid the harbor tax on the cargo weight, I corrected, shaking my head. I pulled out a separate sheet of rice paper covered in tight, meticulous calculations. He forged the shipping manifests perfectly. So I stopped looking at the ships. I started looking at the thread. Liu leaned forward, resting his elbows on his knees, his dark eyes fixed on me with that heavy, intoxicating intensity. Explain. A single bolt of premium winter brocade requires a highly specific weight of raw spun thread, I explained, tapping the paper. To produce the 10,000 bolts the minister claims to have sold, the weavers would require thousands of caddies of raw, dyed silk and heavy wool from the Yi province. But when I cross-referenced the provincial agricultural ledgers, those raw materials were never purchased. The sheep were not sheared in those quantities, and the silk weavers reported a completely average yield. I slid the paper across the desk toward him. He didn't sell winter brocade, Commander. He filled wooden crates with rocks, loaded them onto ships to match the cargo weight, paid the tax to make it look legitimate, and claimed the silver in his vault came from a sale. It is phantom yarn. A mathematical impossibility. Liu stared at the calculations. A slow, deeply dangerous smile spread across his sharp features. It was the smile of a predator that had finally cornered its prey. He washed the stolen military silver through an empty textile trade, Liu murmured, his voice laced with dark reverence. He looked up at me, his eyes burning with something that made the air in the room suddenly feel very thin. The imperial auditors investigated Minister Fong for 3 years and found nothing. You unraveled his entire empire by calculating the weight of invisible thread. Fraud is a careless weaver, Commander, I said softly, feeling a sudden unexpected flush rise to my cheeks under his intense scrutiny. If you pull the right string, the entire garment falls apart. Liu stood up. He walked over to my desk, leaning down so his face was level with mine. The scent of cold metal and sandalwood wrapped around me, completely overwhelming the smell of the cedar incense. He reached out, his leather-clad thumb gently brushing a smudge of dark ink from the side of my cheek. My breath caught in my throat. His touch was shockingly gentle for a man whose hands were built for violence. You are the most dangerous weapon in this pavilion, Zhao Rong, he whispered, his dark eyes flicking down to my lips before rising back to meet my gaze. Before I could formulate a response that didn't sound entirely breathless, the heavy iron doors of the study burst open. Lieutenant Gao rushed in, bowing hastily. Commander, apologies for the interruption, but our spies in the Eastern District have sent an urgent raven. The minister's retainers have realized the ledgers are missing. They are currently pouring oil around the Jade Pavilion trading house. Lu's hand dropped from my cheek, his demeanor instantly turning to ice. They are going to burn the remaining physical evidence. If they burn the trading house, they will destroy the hidden vaults, I said, standing up so quickly my chair scraped against the stone. The phantom textile route is enough to arrest him, but without the physical ledgers from the vault detailing the exact bribes paid to the border quartermasters, the military conspirators will go free. Prepare the horses, Lu commanded Gao, striding toward the weapons rack. He grabbed a heavy black cloak and fastened it over his armor. I am coming with you, I said, grabbing my abacus and a small sealed ink tube. Lu paused, turning to look at me. Absolutely not. The men guarding that trading house are desperate mercenaries. It will be a bloodbath, Rong. And when you breach the vault, do you know which ledgers to seize before the fire consumes them? I challenged, stepping out from behind the desk. They will have dozens of decoy books. By the time you figure out which ones hold the true sums, the roof will collapse. You need me to identify the syntax of the true accounts. Lu stared at me, his jaw clenching. He hated it, but he knew my logic was flawless. With a sharp, frustrated exhale, he crossed the room, unhooked a small, exquisitely crafted dagger from his own belt, and pressed it firmly into my hand. You stay entirely behind me, Lu ordered, his voice brooking zero argument. If a single spark touches you, I will burn the rest of this city to the ground myself. Chapter 5. We rode through the darkened streets of the capital like a black wind. Commander Lu did not trust me to a separate horse. I sat securely in front of him on his massive warhorse, his arm wrapped like an iron band around my waist, pinning me to his chest as we tore through the cobblestone alleys. Even over the pounding of hooves, I could smell the smoke before we reached the merchant district. The Jade Pavilion trading house was a sprawling multi-tiered structure of carved mahogany and paper lanterns. Half of it was already engulfed in a roaring orange blaze. Men in dark, unmarked armor, the minister's hired mercenaries, were throwing clay pots of lamp oil against the lower pillars, ensuring the fire would consume the foundation. Dismount and stay low, Lu ordered into my ear, pulling the warhorse to a brutal halt in the shadows of a neighboring alley. He lifted me down by my waist as easily as if I were made of silk, setting me firmly on the ground. Before my boots had even fully settled, Lu drew his saber. The steel hissed in the night air. He didn't shout a battle cry. The head of the secret police simply became a shadow of sudden, absolute violence. I stayed exactly where he told me, clutching the small dagger he had given me, watching as Lu and Lieutenant Gao breached the mercenary line. Lu moved with terrifying, fluid efficiency. Every strike of his blade was calculated, wasting no energy, systematically clearing a path straight through the burning courtyard to the rear of the trading house. Rong! Now! Lu roared over the crackle of the flames, his saber dripping dark in the firelight. I didn't hesitate. I pulled my sleeves over my mouth to block the thick, acrid smoke and ran across the courtyard, keeping my head down. Lu grabbed my arm the second I reached him, pulling me securely behind his broad back as he kicked open the heavy iron-reinforced doors of the back storehouse. The heat inside was suffocating. The air was thick with the smell of burning silk and melting wax. The vault is in the floor. I coughed, my eyes watering. Corrupt merchants never build their true vaults into the walls. They bury them to survive fires. Lu drove his heavy boot against the center floorboards, shattering the wood and revealing a heavy iron trapdoor. He ripped it open with a sheer display of brute strength, revealing a set of dark stone stairs leading down into a cellar. We rushed down into the dark. The cellar was untouched by the flames, but the smoke was rapidly pooling along the ceiling. Lining the stone walls were dozens of identical, locked wooden chests. Which ones, Zhao? Lu demanded, standing between me and the stairs, his saber ready in case any mercenaries followed us down. We have 3 minutes before the floor above us collapses. I ran to the first chest, using the heavy pommel of Lu's dagger to smash the brittle brass lock. Inside were stacks of perfectly bound ledgers. I threw the first one open. Fakes, I said instantly, tossing it aside and moving to the next chest. You didn't even read the sums, Gao shouted, coughing from the top of the stairs. I don't need to, I shouted back, smashing the second lock. Look at the ink. It is written in formal imperial script, perfectly aligned. A true smuggler dealing in illicit trade uses rapid merchant shorthand to save time. And the bindings are too stiff, they haven't been opened daily. I moved frantically down the line. Third chest. Fourth. The air was growing dangerously thin, the roar of the fire above us sounding like a starving beast. I hit the fifth chest tucked into the darkest corner of the cellar. The lock was different, heavy, complex iron, not cheap brass. "Lou," called out. He was beside me in a heartbeat. He didn't bother with keys or daggers. He raised his heavy boot and drove his heels straight downward, shattering the locking mechanism entirely. I threw the lid open. The ledgers inside were bound in worn, grease-stained leather. I opened the first page and felt a sharp thrill of victory cut through the terror of the smoke. "Suzhou numerals," I whispered, recognizing the obscure, rapid-stroke counting system used only by the most secretive merchant guilds. I scanned the first column. It's here. The bribes, the quartermaster's cuts, the exact weight of the phantom thread. This is the true ledger. "Gather them," Lou ordered, his voice tight. I grabbed the heavy stack of leather books, clutching them to my chest. Just as I turned, a deafening crack echoed above us. "The roof is giving way," Gao yelled, already scrambling up the stairs. Lou grabbed my hand, practically dragging me up the stone steps. We burst out of the trapdoor into an absolute inferno. The main beam of the storehouse roof had snapped, and a massive shower of burning debris was falling directly toward us. I braced for the burning impact, but it never came. Lou threw his heavy, fire-resistant cloak entirely over me, wrapping his arms tightly around my shoulders and burying my face against his chest. He took the brunt of the falling embers on his armored back, shielding me completely with his own body as he drove us forward, crashing through the burning doorway and tumbling out into the cool, blessed night air of the alley. We hit the cobblestones hard. Lou rolled, absorbing the impact, keeping me firmly tucked against him until we were safe in the shadows. I gasped for air, pushing the heavy cloak back. My hands were shaking, covered in soot, but the ledgers were perfectly safe against my chest. I looked up at Lou. His face was streaked with ash, and a shallow cut bled freely across his sharp cheekbone, but his dark eyes were scanning me frantically for injuries. "Are you burned?" His voice was a raw, rough command. He ran his gloved hands rapidly over my arms and shoulders, checking for embers. "Wrong, answer me. Are you burned?" "No," I breathed, my heart hammering a frantic rhythm that had nothing to do with the fire and everything to do with the sheer intensity of his touch. "I am perfectly fine. Thanks to you." Lou's hands slowed, coming to rest on my shoulders. The frantic energy of the battle faded, replaced by that heavy, magnetic stillness. He exhaled a long breath, closing his eyes for a fraction of a second before looking down at me. The distance between us was almost non-existent. "Do not ever step into a burning building again," he whispered, his voice dangerously low. "I secured the assets, Commander," I replied, my voice trembling slightly as I held up the grease-stained ledgers. I rested the books on my knee, opening the cover under the pale moonlight. I traced the obscure merchant numerals, translating them rapidly in my head. The victory, however, was incredibly short-lived. My blood ran cold as I reached the final column of the page. "Lou," I murmured, the night suddenly feeling much colder. "What is it?" he asked, leaning in closer, his arm still resting protectively around my waist. "The Minister of Public Works was taking a massive cut of the stolen military silver, yes?" I pointed to the final sum at the bottom of the ledger. But he wasn't the final destination. The minister was just the toll keeper. I looked up at the head of the secret police, realizing the sheer, terrifying scale of the numbers before me. 50,000 taels of stolen military silver wasn't kept in his vault, I whispered. It was routed directly into the private household accounts of the Emperor's own brother. Chapter 6. The revelation hung in the smoke-filled alley like an executioner's blade. To accuse a minister of theft was a matter of imperial justice. To accuse the Emperor's own brother, Prince Rue, of stealing military funds was to invite a bloodbath that could tear the Yen dynasty apart. Commander Liu stared down at the grease-stained ledger in my hands. The fierce, protective heat that had radiated from him moments before instantly crystallized into absolute, lethal ice. He reached out and snapped the leather cover shut, hiding the damning merchant numerals from the moonlight. "We are leaving," Liu commanded, his voice barely more than a whisper, yet carrying the weight of a war horn. "If Prince Rue's spies realize we hold the true sums, 1,000 mercenaries will descend on this alley before the fires burn out." He did not let me walk. He pulled his heavy cloak tighter around my shoulders, lifted me into his arms, and strode out of the shadows toward his waiting warhorse. The ride back to the obsidian pavilion was a blur of cobblestones and freezing wind. I was pressed so tightly to his armored chest I could feel the steady, heavy thumping of his heart. The gates of the pavilion were thrown open before we even slowed, the guards sensing the sheer, terrifying urgency radiating from their commander. Lu carried me straight through the courtyard, past the bewildered sentries, and directly into his private chambers within the inner keep. It was a stark, unadorned room of dark wood and bare stone, heated by a single roaring hearth. He set me down gently on a low wooden bench near the fire, then immediately turned to the doorway. "Lieutenant Gao." Lu barked into the hall. "Bar the gates to the pavilion. Double the sentries on the inner walls. No one enters or leaves without my seal. Anyone who attempts to scale the walls is to be shot on sight." He slammed the heavy wooden doors shut, throwing the iron bolt into place. The finality of the sound echoed through the quiet chamber. We were locked in. I sat near the hearth, my hands still trembling slightly as I clutched the ledgers to my chest. The soot from the burning trading house stained my fingers and the hem of my cotton robes. Lu turned to face me, his broad shoulders rising and falling with heavy measured breaths. He walked over to a small wash basin, soaking a clean linen cloth in the cold water. He knelt in front of me, taking the ledgers from my rigid grip and setting them safely on the floor. "Look at me," he instructed softly. I lifted my head. He gently pressed the damp cloth to my cheek, wiping away the dark streaks of ash and smoke. His touch was incredibly precise, treating my skin as if it were spun glass. But as the firelight caught the side of his face, I saw the shallow cut on his cheekbone still weeping blood, and a nasty burn searing the edge of his jaw where his cloak hadn't fully protected him. "You are bleeding," I murmured, instinctively reaching out to take the cloth from his hands. Lu froze as my fingers brushed his. He did not pull away. I leaned forward, carefully pressing the damp linen against the cut on his cheekbone. He closed his eyes, his jaw tightening, though not from pain. The fierce, terrifying commander of the Shadow Guards knelt before me in absolute stillness, allowing me to tend to his wounds. "You should not be in this room, Zhao Rong," he whispered, his voice dark and heavy with a sudden, crushing guilt. He opened his eyes, the intensity in them pinning me to the spot. "I brought you into the pavilion to calculate stolen taxes. I did not intend to drag you into a treasonous war against the royal bloodline. If the prince discovers you possess his ledger, your life is forfeit. Then we must ensure he does not discover it until his head is on the chopping block," I answered steadily, wiping the last drop of blood from his jaw. I lowered the cloth, meeting his dark gaze without wavering. "My father was exiled because a corrupt man buried his crimes in the numbers. I will not allow another thief to hide behind his sums, even if he wears a royal crown." Lu stared at me, his breath hitching slightly. A terrifyingly beautiful, reverent smile ghosted across his lips. He reached up, his large hand covering mine where it rested near his face. "Then we strike first," Lu said. I pulled away gently, the heat of his skin lingering on my fingertips, and reached for the grease-stained ledgers on the floor. "To strike a prince, we cannot simply show the emperor a sum of stolen silver. Prince Rue will claim the minister forged the records to frame him. We must trace what the prince did with the silver." I moved to the low table near the hearth, spreading the pages open in the firelight. Lu dragged a chair over, sitting close beside me, his saber resting against his knee. 50,000 taels is a fortune," I murmured, my eyes scanning the rapid-stroke Suzhou numerals. "A man does not steal that much wealth simply to let it sit in a dark vault. He spends it. We must follow the expenditure." I traced a finger down the column of disbursements from the prince's household account. The characters began to form a chilling pattern. "Look here." I pointed to a repeated set of symbols. "He is not buying silk or jade. He is purchasing from the western mountain provinces. Heavy shipments. What is mined in the west?" Lu leaned over, his arm brushing mine. "Iron. And coal." "Exactly," I said, reaching for a spare brush and an inkstone sitting on his desk. I began to scratch out calculations on a fresh sheet of paper. According to these sums, the prince is buying massive quantities of raw iron ore. But look at the ratio of charcoal, he is requisitioning alongside it. I wrote out the fractional parts, dividing the weight of the coal by the weight of the iron. To forge standard agricultural tools, plowshares and sickles, a blacksmith requires a specific low ratio of charcoal, I explained, the horrifying reality of the numbers settling into my bones. But the heat required to forge military-grade steel, to fold the metal enough times to create a saber or a spearhead, requires nearly 3 times the amount of charcoal per caddy of iron. I looked up from the paper, my blood running as cold as the winter wind outside. "This is the steel ratio, Commander," I whispered. "Prince Rue is not just hoarding stolen wealth. He is buying weapons. Enough weapons to arm 10,000 men. He is raising a hidden garrison." Lu's face turned entirely to stone. The theft of silver was a crime. The raising of a private army was a direct declaration of war against the Emperor. "Where is the garrison?" Lu asked, his voice entirely devoid of warmth. "Can you calculate the location?" "The ledgers only show the payments," I said, scouring the bottom of the page. "But the merchants delivering the iron must be taking it somewhere. There is a delivery tax code noted here. It corresponds to a remote valley in the Qinghai foothills, just beyond the imperial hunting grounds." Lu stood up, the chair scraping loudly against the stone floor. He strapped his saber firmly to his belt. The head of the secret police had just found his battlefield. "Stay in this room, Zhao Rong," Lu commanded, throwing a heavy wolf fur blanket over the bench to keep me warm. "Do not open the door for anyone except me." "Where are you going?" I asked, watching him move toward the iron doors. "To the Emperor's bedchamber," Lu said, his hand resting on the heavy bolt. His dark eyes flicked back to me, filled with a terrifying, unyielding resolve. To tell him his brother is preparing to steal his throne, and that I require an army to stop him. Chapter 7. The heavy iron bolt slid into place with a sound of absolute finality, leaving me alone in the flickering light of the hearth. Commander Lu's chambers were as stark and unyielding as the man himself. There were no decorative silk screens or painted porcelain vases, only racks of polished steel weapons and shelves of bound military scrolls. I wrapped his heavy wolf fur cloak tightly around my shoulders, attempting to ward off the chill that had settled deep into my bones. I was a lowly scribe from the damp basements of the ministry, and I had just handed the Emperor's executioner the proof needed to behead a royal prince. I looked down at the grease-stained ledger resting on the low wooden table. The numbers stared back at me, written in the frantic, slanting strokes of merchant shorthand. Lu had trusted my calculations completely, riding straight to the Emperor to request a battalion to march on the Qinghai foothills. But a strange, uneasy feeling gnawed at the edge of my mind. A true scribe never stops checking her sums. I knelt by the fire, pulling the ledger back onto my lap. I picked up my brush, dipping it into the inkstone, and began to trace the supply lines backward. If Prince Rue is forging 10,000 weapons in the remote Qinghai foothills, I thought, tapping the end of the brush against my chin, he must transport the raw iron from the capital to the mountains. The journey takes 2 weeks. I turned the page, searching for the transport expenses. I found the tallies for the ox carts hired by the prince's merchants. I found the wages paid to the drivers. Then, I looked at the grain and hay purchased to feed the oxen along the route. My breath caught in my throat. I dragged the brush across the rice paper, dividing the weight of the hay by the number of beasts. There was not enough food. The merchants had only purchased enough fodder to sustain the heavy ox carts for a 2-day journey. If they had truly traveled to the Qinghai foothills, the beasts of burden would have starved before they reached the halfway point. The numbers did not lie. The weapons were not in the distant mountains. The delivery tax code was a decoy, meant to send the Emperor's armies marching weeks in the wrong direction, while the true threat remained close. A 2-day journey for a heavy cart meant the armory was hidden just outside the capital's walls. The western ridge. I whispered into the quiet room, staring at the terrifying truth on the paper. The abandoned silver mines. Prince Rue wasn't just raising an army. He was hiding them right at the Emperor's throat, waiting for the perfect moment to strike. By sending Lu and the Imperial Vanguard to the remote mountains, the prince would leave the capital completely undefended. I had to warn him. I had to stop Lu before he gave the Emperor the false location. I stood up quickly, the heavy fur cloak slipping from my shoulders. I gathered the ledgers, rushing toward the heavy iron doors. I raised my fist to strike the wood and call for the guards. Before my knuckles could touch the door, the massive bronze warning bell of the obsidian pavilion began to toll. The sound was deafening, a frantic rhythmic ringing that vibrated through the stone floor beneath my feet. It was the alarm for a breach. "To the gates!" A harsh voice shouted from the courtyard outside my window. "Archers on the wall!" I dropped the ledgers onto the desk and ran to the narrow, iron-barred window. The courtyard, which had been silent only moments before, was a chaotic storm of drawn steel and shouting men. Dozens of shadow guards were rushing toward the main gates, raising their heavy crossbows. Beyond the high black walls of the pavilion, I could see the glow of hundreds of torches flooding the streets. Prince Rue had not waited for the morning. He knew his merchant's vault had been raided. He knew the shadow guards possessed his true ledgers, and he had sent his hidden garrison to slaughter everyone in the pavilion before the sun could rise. The clash of steel ringing out from the gates was deafening. Arrows hissed through the night air, striking the stone walls of the keep. "Lady Zhao." Lieutenant Gao's voice echoed from the hallway outside the chamber. The heavy iron bolt rattled violently as he struggled to slide it open. "Do not open the door," I shouted, stepping back from the window. "Commander Lu ordered it sealed. The commander is trapped within the inner palace." Gao yelled through the thick wood, the sound of blades clashing drawing frighteningly close to the hallway. "The prince's sellswords have breached the outer courtyard. They are burning the archives to destroy the evidence. I am ordered to move you to the deep cells." I looked at the grease-stained ledger on the desk. If I left it, the mercenaries would burn it, and the emperor would have no proof of his brother's treason. I grabbed the heavy leather book, shoved it securely into the wide sash of my cotton robes, and picked up the small dagger Lu had given me earlier that night. "Open it," I shouted. The heavy bolt slid back with a screech of iron. Lieutenant Gao threw the door open, his armor covered in soot and his sword already drawn. Two other shadow guards stood behind him, their eyes scanning the dark corridor for threats. "Keep your head down, scribe," Gao ordered, his voice tight with adrenaline. "We are going beneath the armory." I nodded, stepping out of the safety of Lu's chambers and into the bleeding, burning heart of the Obsidian Pavilion. Chapter 8. The corridors of the Obsidian Pavilion were built to be a fortress, a maze of black stone designed to confuse intruders. But the prince's mercenaries were not ordinary sellswords. They fought with the disciplined, lethal precision of a highly trained military vanguard. We sprinted down the dimly lit hallway, the clash of steel echoing off the stone walls. Smoke was already beginning to drift through the lower levels from the burning outer courtyards. "Left turn," Lieutenant Gao shouted, shoving me behind him as we rounded a sharp corner. He barely brought his saber up in time. Three mercenaries in dark armor, their faces obscured by iron masks, lunged from the shadows of an intersecting corridor. Gao met the first strike with a bone-jarring parry. The two guards behind us engaged the others, the narrow hallway instantly erupting into a frantic, brutal melee. Sparks flew as steel clashed in the confined space. "Stay behind me, Zhao," Gao roared, driving his boot into the knee of his attacker and following through with a vicious slash. I pressed myself flat against the cold stone wall, clutching the ledger tightly beneath my robes, my other hand gripping Lu's dagger. I was a master of sums, not swords. I had never seen men die in front of me before. The metallic smell of blood mixed with the acrid smoke, making my stomach churn violently. One of Gao's guards fell, a mercenary's blade finding the gap in his armor. The masked killer did not pause. He stepped over the fallen guard and lunged directly toward me. Time seemed to slow entirely. I saw the glint of his sword, the focused intent in his eyes beneath the iron mask. I didn't have time to scream. I didn't have time to run. I raised Lu's dagger, a desperate, instinctual movement. But before the mercenary's blade could fall, a black-fletched arrow tore through the narrow corridor, burying itself deep into the side of the mercenary's neck. The man dropped his sword, collapsing heavily to the stone floor just inches from my feet. I gasped, looking down the long corridor behind me. Standing at the far end of the hall, the heavy oak doors of the central keep hanging in splinters behind him, was Commander Lu. He held a massive heavy iron crossbow in one hand, having fired it single-handedly with terrifying accuracy. He tossed the empty weapon aside and drew his saber. He was not wearing his formal robes anymore. He was stripped down to his dark leather combat tunic, his silver guan lost, his dark hair falling wild and loose around his sharp face. He looked like the god of war descending into the underworld. "Clear the hall," Lu roared, his voice a tidal wave of pure, absolute authority. He didn't run. He surged forward with terrifying predatory speed. He hit the remaining two mercenaries like a battering ram, his saber a blur of silver in the dim light. It was over in seconds. The assassins fell, the hallway falling eerily quiet save for the crackle of distant fires. Lu didn't spare the fallen men a second glance. He strode directly toward me, grabbing my shoulders with a grip tight enough to bruise. "Are you injured?" he demanded, his dark eyes frantically scanning my face, my robes, my hands. His chest was heaving, covered in soot, and a fresh cut bled freely down his forearm. "No," I breathed, my hands shaking violently as I looked at the bodies on the floor. "I am unharmed. Gao protected me." Lu let out a harsh, jagged exhale, pulling me fiercely against his chest for a fraction of a second, as if he needed to feel the physical proof that I was alive. The sheer relief radiating from him was staggering. He stepped back, turning his lethal focus onto his second in command. "Lieutenant, report." Gao sheathed his bloodied sword, bowing deeply despite his exhaustion. "Commander, the prince's forces struck before we could reinforce the outer gates. They are burning the eastern archive block. But you were sealed in the imperial palace. The emperor is secure in the inner sanctum," Lu said, his voice dropping to a dangerous rumble. I fought my way out the moment I saw the smoke rising from our sector. The prince knew I was going to the throne room. This attack is a distraction to destroy the evidence before the emperor can officially review it. "The ledger is safe," I interrupted, pulling the grease-stained book from my sash. "But Commander, we have a much larger problem. I rechecked the transport sums after you left." Lu's sharp eyes snapped to mine. "You found an error?" "No, I found a lie," I corrected urgently. The supply carts did not carry enough hay to reach the Qinghai Mountains. They only carried enough for a 2-day journey. Prince Rui's hidden armory isn't weeks away. It is right outside the capital walls. The abandoned silver mines on the western ridge. The blood completely drained from Gao's face. "The western ridge? The Imperial Vanguard is currently marching south to the Summer Palace. If the prince strikes the capital from the west, the city will fall before noon tomorrow." Lu stared at me, the terrifying reality of the numbers settling over him. He had almost ordered the emperor's remaining forces miles in the wrong direction based on the decoy sum. I had just saved the entire capital from a massacre simply by calculating the diet of an ox. "You brilliant, dangerous woman," Lu whispered, a dark, fierce reverence blazing in his eyes. He reached out, his hand gently framing the side of my face, his thumb brushing over my cheekbone. For a moment, the burning pavilion and the sounds of war entirely vanished. There was only the intense heat of his hand and the heavy, undeniable pull between us. "Commander," Gao interrupted urgently, clearing his throat and looking away. "The main gates are buckling. The mercenaries are preparing to breach the inner keep." Lu's hand dropped from my face, his expression instantly hardening back into the ruthless executioner. He took the ledger from me, securing it beneath his heavy leather tunic. "Gao, take Lady Zhao to the deep vaults beneath the armory and lock the iron doors from the inside," Lu commanded, gripping his saber. "Do not open them until I return." "Where are you going?" I asked, a sudden spike of panic tightening my chest as he turned away. Lu looked back over his shoulder, the firelight catching the sharp planes of his face and the lethal edge of his blade. "To the western ridge," the head of the secret police said, his voice as cold and heavy as a tombstone. "To slaughter an army before it wakes." Chapter 9. "You cannot go to the western ridge alone," I shouted, the strict decorum of a lowly scribe entirely forgotten. I grabbed his forearm, my fingers digging into the heavy leather of his tunic. "Prince Rui has 10,000 men in that armory, Commander. It is mathematical suicide." Lu looked down at my hand gripping his arm, then slowly up to my face. The absolute, terrifying calm in his eyes did not waver. "I am not going alone, Rong," Lu said, his voice a low, steady rumble meant to ground me. "I am taking the elite vanguard of the Shadow Guards. But we must strike the mines tonight, under the cover of darkness, before the prince gives the order to march on the capital." "A vanguard of 300 men against an entrenched garrison of 10,000? I challenged, my mind instantly running the bleak, unforgiving probabilities. "They are dug into the mines. The choke point is too narrow. They will slaughter your men in the tunnels. The casualty rate will be absolute. If we do not hold them in the tunnels, they will breach the city walls by dawn," Lu stated, his jaw set in a rigid line. He reached over, gently but firmly prying my fingers from his arm. "I am the Emperor's blade. This is what I was forged for. Blades break against stone, Lu." I countered desperately. I stepped in front of him, refusing to let him walk toward the burning courtyard. My mind was racing, tearing through every ledger, every map, every geographical report I had ever memorized in the Ministry of Revenue. The abandoned silver mines on the western ridge. High elevation. Deep tunnels. Poor ventilation. Wait! I breathed, the realization striking me like a physical blow. I looked up at him, my eyes wide. The western ridge mines were not abandoned because they ran out of silver, Commander. They were abandoned because of the water. Lu frowned, his saber lowering slightly. Explain. 10 years ago, my father audited the western province, I said rapidly, the numbers and reports flooding back to me with absolute clarity. The miners breached an underground aquifer. The lower tunnels flooded entirely. The Imperial engineers built a massive earthen dam higher up the mountain to divert the river and keep the upper levels dry. But the structural integrity was deemed too costly to maintain. That is why they closed the mines. Lieutenant Gao, who had been listening intently, paled. The prince is housing his army in a dry riverbed beneath a failing dam. He likely doesn't know about the aquifer, I continued, tracing a crude map in the soot on the stone wall with my finger. He saw an empty, secure cavern and moved his weapons inside. But if you take your vanguard into those tunnels, you will die with them. I turned to Lu, my heart pounding a frantic rhythm against my ribs. Do not fight them with swords, Commander. Fight them with the mountain. Send your men to the upper ridge. Shatter the earthen dam. Lu stared at me, the terrifying brilliance of the strategy washing over him. It was an execution order on a massive, unprecedented scale. It required no siege, no prolonged battle. Only the ruthless application of geography and physics. A slow, deeply dangerous smile spread across his face. It was the smile of a man who had just been handed the perfect weapon. Lieutenant Gao, Lu commanded, his voice ringing with a renewed, lethal energy. Take 50 men. Hold the inner keep against the mercenaries. The rest of the vanguard rides with me to the western ridge. Yes, Commander, Gao shouted, drawing his sword and sprinting toward the courtyard to rally the defenders. Lu turned back to me. The sounds of battle were growing louder, the heavy wooden doors of the pavilion groaning under the assault. Go to the deep vaults, Zhao Rong, Lu said softly, stepping close. He reached out, his hand coming to rest firmly on the back of my neck, his thumb tracing the line of my jaw. The sheer intensity of his touch sent a shockwave straight through my chest. Lock the iron doors. Keep the ledger safe. Come back, I whispered, the command lacking all its usual administrative authority. Lu leaned down, pressing his forehead against mine. The scent of smoke, cold steel, and sandalwood enveloped me completely. I will return to you, even if I have to crawl out of hell itself to do it. He pulled away, his dark eyes locking onto mine one final time, before he turned and sprinted toward the burning courtyard. I did not wait to watch him leave. I turned and ran in the opposite direction, descending deep into the cold, stone bowels of the obsidian pavilion. The vaults beneath the armory were pitch black and freezing. I threw the heavy iron bolt into place, the loud clang echoing in the dark. I slumped against the cold metal door, clutching Lu's dagger in one hand and the air in my lungs burning from the smoke. For the next 4 hours I sat in the absolute dark, listening to the muffled, terrifying sounds of the siege raging above me. I listened to the crash of splintering wood, the screams of dying men, and the heavy thud of boots on stone. I calculated the time it would take Lu to ride to the ridge. I calculated the time it would take to breach the dam. I calculated the odds of him surviving. They were devastatingly low. Sometime near dawn, the sounds of battle above me slowly began to die down. The screaming stopped. The clash of steel faded. The silence that followed was heavy and suffocating. Then, heavy footsteps echoed down the stone corridor leading to the vault. I scrambled to my feet, gripping the dagger so tightly my knuckles turned white. I pressed my ear against the freezing iron door, my heart hammering in my throat. A heavy gloved hand struck the metal door 3 times. Rong. The voice was rough, ragged, and utterly exhausted, but it was him. I threw the iron bolt back so hard I tore the skin on my palm. I pulled the heavy door open. Commander Lu stood in the dimly lit corridor. He was covered in mud, blood, and soot. His dark leather armor was slashed in several places, and he was leaning heavily against the stone wall for support. But he was alive. He looked at me, a profound, staggering relief breaking through the exhaustion on his sharp face. He dropped his bloodied saber to the floor, the metal clattering loudly in the quiet hall. I didn't think. I didn't calculate. I dropped the dagger and threw myself at him. Lu caught me, his arms wrapping around me like a vice, burying his face in my hair. He smelled of rain, mud, and victory. The dam! I whispered against his chest, tears finally hot against my cheeks. Shattered. Lu breathed, his voice vibrating against my ear. The mines are flooded. The prince's army is gone. The capital is safe. He pulled back slightly, his dark eyes fiercely locked onto mine. He didn't say another word. He simply lowered his head and kissed me. It was not a gentle, polite kiss of the imperial court. It was a desperate, consuming clash of heat and exhaustion. A raw demand for life after a night of absolute death. I wrapped my arms around his neck, pulling him closer, returning the kiss with every ounce of fear and longing I had held back in the dark. "Commander!" The frantic shout echoed down the corridor. Lu broke the kiss, his breathing heavy, his forehead resting against mine as he let out a deeply frustrated sigh. Lieutenant Gao rounded the corner, his armor battered but his eyes wide with urgency. He skidded to a halt, completely freezing when he saw the head of the secret police holding the lowly ministry scribe in a fiercely possessive embrace. Gao immediately averted his eyes, clearing his throat loudly. "Apologies, Commander. But the Emperor's personal guard has arrived at the pavilion. The Emperor is demanding a full audit of the night's events, and he wishes to speak with the woman who discovered his brother's treason." Lu slowly pulled back, his hand lingering on my waist. A proud, lethal smile touched the corner of his lips. "It seems, Lady Zhao," Lu murmured, smoothing a stray lock of hair behind my ear, "you have a meeting with the Emperor." Chapter 10. Commander Lu did not immediately step away from me. Despite Gao's frantic interruption and the summons of the Emperor himself, Lu kept one hand firmly resting on the curve of my waist. He slowly turned his head to look at his lieutenant, his dark eyes filled with a terrifying, unapologetic calm. "Tell the Imperial Guard," Lu said, his voice a low, gravelly drawl, "that we will be there in 10 minutes. The Lady Zhao requires a moment to gather her ledgers." Gao swallowed hard, bowing so quickly he nearly hit the stone wall. "Yes, Commander." He vanished down the corridor as fast as his boots could carry him. Once we were alone, Lu let out a long, heavy exhale, the adrenaline of the night finally beginning to recede. He looked down at me, his gaze softening as he took in my soot-stained face and the ruined hem of my cotton robes. He reached out, gently lifting the heavy wool fur cloak from my shoulders and wrapping it securely around me, hiding the blood and ash beneath the dark fur. "You are about to stand before the Son of Heaven," Lu murmured, his fingers lingering on the collar of the cloak. "He will attempt to terrify you. He will question your math, your bloodline, and your motives." "I have spent the last 3 weeks being terrified by the basement rats in the Ministry of Revenue, Commander," I replied, my voice steadying as I reached down to pick up my abacus and the grease-stained ledger. "The Emperor is just a man. Numbers, however, are divine. I will let them speak for me." Lu stared at me, that fierce, reverent smile returning to his sharp features. "Stay close to me, Rong. If anyone in that throne room so much as raises their voice at you, they will answer to my blade." The walk from the obsidian pavilion to the inner sanctum of the palace was surreal. The sun was just beginning to rise, casting a pale golden light over the capital. The smoke from the eastern district was still visible, but the city itself was quiet, completely unaware of the massacre that had almost occurred on their doorsteps. The imperial throne room was a cavernous hall of polished jade and towering golden pillars. It was heavily guarded by the elite imperial vanguard, their halberds gleaming in the morning light. At the far end of the hall sat the emperor of the Yan dynasty. He was an older, sharper version of Prince Rue. He possessed the same cold, calculating eyes, but while the prince's gaze held the arrogance of a thief, the emperor's held the absolute weight of a conqueror. Standing before the dais, bound in heavy iron chains and forced to his knees, was Prince Rue himself. His silk robes were torn, his face pale with a mixture of rage and terror. The emperor had sent the royal guard to drag him from his bed, the moment Lu's messenger had breached the inner palace. Lu and I walked down the center of the hall. The murmurs of the assembled ministers fell dead silent. Lu did not bow. The head of the secret police was exempt from the physical submission required of the court. I, however, dropped to my knees and pressed my forehead to the cool jade floor. "Rise, Zhao Rong," the emperor commanded, his voice echoing off the golden pillars. I stood, keeping my eyes respectfully lowered, though my grip on my abacus was like iron. Prince Rue spat a curse onto the jade floor. "She is a liar, a disgraced daughter of a thief trying to buy back her nobility with forged ledgers." "Silence," the emperor snapped, the temperature in the room instantly dropping. He turned his piercing gaze back to me. "Step forward, scribe. Defend your sums." I didn't hesitate. I walked past the kneeling prince, stopping just at the edge of the dais. I unrolled the grease-stained ledger I had pulled from the burning trading house. "Your Imperial Majesty," I began, my voice clear and projecting perfectly through the massive hall. "The proof of treason is not in the grand sums, but in the fractions. Your brother claimed to be utilizing a merchant fleet to transport silver and raw iron to the remote Qinghai Mountains. But when one audits the transport ledgers, the merchants only purchased enough hay to feed the heavy ox carts for a 2-day journey." I held up the ledger, pointing to the rapid stroke merchant numerals. "If the destination was truly the Qinghai Mountains, the oxen would have starved on the road," I stated simply. "The destination was the abandoned silver mines on the western ridge. The prince was hiding a garrison of 10,000 men just 3 miles from your throne." "Forged!" Prince Rue screamed, thrashing against his chains. "The Minister of Public Works forged those logs to cover his own embezzlement." I turned to look at the prince, my expression perfectly flat. "The Minister of Public Works embezzled 50,000 taels of silver using a phantom textile trade. He bought the raw iron for you. But the minister is a greedy man, Your Highness." He kept precise, coded ledgers of exactly how much of the stolen military silver was routed into your personal household accounts to protect himself. I turned back to the emperor, offering the ledger to the head eunuch, who rushed it up to the throne. "The minister did not forge the ox cart logs, Your Majesty, because a corrupt man does not care about the oxen," I concluded, folding my hands over my abacus. "He only cares about the silver." The omission of the hay was an administrative oversight by the prince's own quartermasters. It was the only honest number in the entire ledger. The emperor stared down at the grease-stained pages. He was a brilliant tactician, and it only took him a moment to read the merchant shorthand. The horrific truth of the betrayal washed over his face, turning his expression to stone. He slowly rolled the ledger closed. He looked at his brother, his eyes entirely devoid of mercy. "Take him to the deep cells," the emperor commanded the guards. "He is stripped of his royal name. Prepare the execution edict." As the screaming, thrashing prince was dragged from the throne room, the emperor leaned back in his jade chair. He looked at me for a very long silent moment. "Your father was Zhao Feng," the emperor said quietly. "He was exiled for losing 20,000 taels of flood relief silver." "He was framed by the Minister of Public Works, Your Majesty," I corrected, keeping my chin high. "If you permit me to audit the provincial flood ledgers from 5 years ago, I can show you the exact discrepancy where the minister routed the silver into his phantom textile trade." The emperor's lips twitched into a faint impressed smile. "You possess a terrifying mind, Zhao Rong. The imperial court has been blind to the rot within its own walls. Your father's name is formally cleared. His titles are restored, and he will be recalled from exile immediately." I closed my eyes, a wave of profound, staggering relief crashing over me. The 3 years of shame, the damp basement, the whispered insults, it was finally over. "Furthermore," the emperor continued, "the Ministry of Revenue is in desperate need of a purge. I am officially appointing you as the chief imperial auditor. You will have a seat at the high table." The ministers in the hall gasped. It was unprecedented. A woman had never held a high ministerial position in the history of the Yin dynasty. I opened my mouth to accept the emperor's incredible offer, but a heavy leather-clad hand suddenly came to rest on my shoulder. Commander Lu stepped forward, his dark soot-stained armor a stark contrast to the gleaming gold of the throne room. He looked up at the emperor, his expression perfectly respectful, yet carrying the absolute, unyielding authority of a man who had just drowned 10,000 traitors before breakfast. "Forgive me, Your Majesty," Lu rumbled, his voice echoing through the silent hall. "But the Ministry of Revenue is not equipped to protect a weapon of Lady Zhao's caliber. If she audits the High Court, she will make powerful enemies. The scribes cannot guard her." The emperor raised an eyebrow. "And who do you suggest guards her, Commander?" Lu looked down at me, his icy lethal demeanor completely softening into a fierce territorial heat that made my breath catch in my throat. "She is already employed by the Obsidian Pavilion, Your Majesty," Lu stated, his hand tightening slightly on my shoulder. "Lady Zhao is the chief strategist of the Shadow Guards, and she is under my absolute personal protection." The emperor looked between the two of us, the terrifying blood-soaked commander and the small soot-stained scribe clutching a wooden abacus. The emperor let out a low, genuine laugh that echoed off the jade walls. "Very well, Commander," the emperor conceded with a wave of his hand. "The shadow guards may keep their auditor, but I expect a full, comprehensive report of the minister's embezzlements on my desk by the end of the week." "She will have it done by tomorrow evening," Lou promised smoothly. I looked up at him, my eyes widening. "Tomorrow evening? Lou, there are 3 years of ledgers to cross-reference." "Then we had better get back to the pavilion," Lou murmured, the ghost of a smile playing on his lips as he turned me gently toward the heavy golden doors. 6 months later, the Obsidian Pavilion was no longer just a fortress of executioners. It was the most feared financial institution in the empire. Corrupt ministers no longer feared the executioner's blade as much as they feared the sound of my abacus. The Phantom Yarn audit had become legendary, resulting in the arrest of 24 high-ranking officials who had thought their ledgers were untouchable. My workspace had been significantly upgraded. I now occupied the massive study adjacent to Commander Lou's, filled with the finest rosewood furniture, endless supplies of premium rice paper, and a window that overlooked the training courtyards. I sat at my desk, meticulously finalizing the tax adjustments for the newly secured Western Ridge, when the heavy oak doors connecting my office to Lou's swung open. Lou walked in, wearing his immaculate, crimson-trimmed dark robes. The shallow scar on his cheekbone, a permanent reminder of the night the pavilion burned, only made him look more devastatingly handsome. He didn't say a word. He walked up behind my chair, his large hands resting heavily on my shoulders, his thumbs gently massaging the tension at the base of my neck. I let out a soft sigh, leaning back into his touch, my hands leaving the abacus. "You have been staring at those provincial logs for 6 hours, Rome?" Lou murmured, pressing a soft kiss to the crown of my head. "The numbers are not going to flee the capital. The southern magistrates are misreporting their tea yields," I noted, tilting my head back to look at him upside down. "They are hiding a 10% surplus. I can feel it." Lou chuckled, a deep, rich sound that vibrated against my back. He stepped around the desk, effortlessly lifting me from my chair and pulling me securely against his chest. "The southern magistrates can wait until tomorrow," the head of the secret police commanded softly, his dark eyes locking onto mine. "Your shift is officially over, Chief Strategist." I smiled, wrapping my arms around his neck, sliding my fingers into the dark hair at the nape of his neck. "Are you requisitioning my time, Commander?" "I am monopolizing it," Lou whispered, his gaze dropping to my lips. "Permanently." He kissed me, slow and deep, a perfect, undeniable sum of everything we had built together in the dark. The ledgers, the abacus, and the imperial court faded entirely away, leaving only the terrifying, wonderful reality that the Emperor's most dangerous weapon was entirely, irrevocably mine. Chapter 11. The problem with a happy ending in the Obsidian Pavilion was that the Yin dynasty's ledgers never actually stopped bleeding. 3 days after I had casually mentioned the southern tea yields to Commander Lou, the discrepancy had grown from a minor administrative annoyance into a glaring mathematical siren. I stood in the center of my study, a massive map of the southern coastline unrolled across my rosewood desk. Small, painted wooden blocks were scattered across the parchment, representing the reported merchant vessels leaving the Pearl River ports. Lou stood on the opposite side of the desk, his arms crossed over his dark leather armor. He had just returned from drilling the Vanguard, his hair slightly damp with sweat, but his dark eyes were fixed entirely on the map. 10% of the annual tea harvest, Lou repeated, his voice a low, dangerous rumble. That is thousands of caddies of premium black tea. Cannot simply vanish, Rong. Tea is bulky. It requires massive warehouses and heavy ships to transport. It isn't vanishing, Commander. It is being bartered, I said, leaning over the map and sliding 3 wooden blocks away from the imperial shipping lanes and into the uncharted waters of the Southern Sea. I picked up my abacus, the familiar weight of the wood grounding my racing thoughts. The Southern governor claims the 10% deficit is due to a sudden, unseasonal frost that killed the crops. But I requisitioned the weather logs from the Imperial Observatory. There was no frost. The yield was perfect. Lou's jaw tightened. So he is hiding the surplus to sell on the black market. Worse, I said, sliding the final bead on my abacus into place. I looked up to meet his icy gaze. Tea is an imperial monopoly. Selling it on the black market within the empire is too risky. The marked bricks are easily traced. He is trading it outside the empire. to the pirate syndicates operating in the Southern Sea. Lieutenant Gao, who was standing guard near the doorway, let out a sharp breath. Trading with the syndicates is high treason. But what could the pirates possibly offer a provincial governor in return that equals the value of thousands of caddies of premium tea? That is exactly the question I asked myself, I replied, unrolling a second, narrower scroll. It was a harbor tax log. So, I audited the structural reinforcements of the governor's personal port warehouses over the last 6 months. Lu leaned forward, his hands bracing the edges of the desk. He knew exactly how my mind worked by now. He knew the trap had already snapped shut. What did you find? He built the treasury for massive quantities of ironwood timber and stone to reinforce the floorboards of his primary storehouse. I explained, tracing the expenses with my ink-stained finger. Tea is light. It does not require reinforced stone floors. Only 2 things require that level of structural support: solid gold or black powder. The temperature in the study instantly plummeted. Gunpowder, Lu whispered, the word hanging in the air like a lit fuse. The governor is trading stolen tea to the pirates in exchange for untraceable syndicate-manufactured black powder. I confirmed, my blood running cold at the sheer scale of the treason. And based on the weight capacity he built into those floors, he has acquired enough powder to blow the entire southern fleet out of the water. Lu didn't hesitate. The strategist in him aligned perfectly with the executioner. Gao! Lu barked, his posture instantly rigid. Ready the vanguard. We ride for the Pearl River province within the hour. Send a raven to the southern admiral. Tell him to blockade the port. Nothing leaves the harbor. Yes, Commander, Gao shouted, turning on his heel and sprinting down the corridor. Lu turned away from the desk, moving swiftly to the weapons rack to retrieve his heavy traveling cloak. I am coming with you, I said, already reaching for the oiled leather tube I used to protect my ledgers during travel. Lu paused, his hand resting on the hilt of his saber. He looked back at me, his sharp features caught between his absolute duty to the Emperor and his overwhelming, terrifying instinct to keep me safe. Rowing the southern ports are a nest of vipers, Lu said, his voice softening just a fraction, a tone reserved entirely for me. If the governor realizes the shadow guards are coming, he will deploy the syndicate mercenaries. And if you breach his warehouses without knowing exactly which crates hold the powder, a single stray spark from a saber will incinerate your entire vanguard. I countered smoothly, stepping around the desk to face him. The governor will have disguised the powder among legitimate cargo. You need me to read the merchant shipping codes on the crates to identify the blast radius. Lu stared down at me. He let out a heavy, resigned sigh, but the dark, proud reverence in his eyes was unmistakable. He reached out, his leather-clad thumb gently brushing a smudge of ink from my cheek. Pack your abacus, Chief Auditor, the commander murmured, leaning down to press a swift, fierce kiss to my forehead. We are going south. Chapter 12. The Pearl River port was suffocatingly humid, the air thick with the smell of brine, rotting fish, and exotic spices. We arrived under the cover of a moonless night. Lu had left the main body of the vanguard outside the city walls to avoid triggering an alarm, bringing only Gao and a dozen elite shadow guards to infiltrate the docks. I walked directly behind Lu, completely enveloped in a dark, hooded cloak to conceal my identity. The governor's primary storehouse loomed at the edge of the water, a massive, imposing structure of dark wood and stone. It was heavily guarded by men who did not wear imperial armor, but the rough, mismatched leather of the sea syndicates. Lu signaled with 2 fingers. The shadow guards melted into the darkness. There were no battle cries, no ringing of steel. It was a silent, terrifyingly efficient execution of duty. Within seconds, the syndicate guards at the main doors were neutralized and dragged into the shadows. Lu easily picked the heavy iron lock of the main warehouse doors, pushing them open just enough for us to slip inside. The interior was pitch black, smelling strongly of dried tea leaves and damp wood. The warehouse was massive, filled floor to ceiling with thousands of identical wooden shipping crates. Light the dark lantern, Lu whispered to Gao. A faint, highly directed beam of light illuminated the first row of crates. They were all stamped with the official imperial seal for black tea. They are identical, Gao murmured, his hand nervously resting on his sword. Commander, to search all of these would take days. They are not identical, I whispered, stepping forward into the narrow beam of light. I knelt beside the nearest stack of crates. I ignored the large, prominent imperial seals and looked closely at the lower left corners of the wood. searching for the small rapid-stroke merchant codes branded into the grain. The governor is using the tea crates as a front, I explained, moving quickly down the aisle. But dock workers are paid by weight, not by volume. A crate of black powder is significantly heavier than a crate of tea leaves. The foreman would have to mark the heavy crates, so the workers wouldn't break their backs or drop them. I scanned the brands, my eyes flying over the Suzhou numerals. Standard weight. Standard weight. Standard weight. Here, I breathed, stopping abruptly in front of a massive stack of crates near the reinforced center pillars of the warehouse. I pointed to a tiny, barely visible brand depicting a crescent moon beside the number 4. The crescent moon is the syndicate's mark, and the number 4 denotes quadruple the standard weight. These crates hold the powder. Secure the perimeter, Lu ordered in a low, deadly voice. We have the evidence. We seized the governor at his estate before dawn. Before Gao could relay the order, the heavy warehouse doors at the far end of the building were violently thrown open. Dozens of torches flooded the massive space with harsh, flickering light. Standing in the doorway, flanked by 50 heavily armed syndicate mercenaries, was the southern governor himself. I was warned the emperor's mad dog was sniffing around my ports, the governor sneered, drawing a heavy, curved cutlass. Did you really think I wouldn't post watchers on the main road? You walked directly into your own grave, Commander Lu. Lu did not flinch. He didn't even draw his saber immediately. He simply stepped smoothly in front of me, his broad shoulders completely shielding me from the torchlight. You are standing in a room filled with black powder holding 50 open flames, Lu stated, his voice a glacier of absolute calm. Your math is as poor as your loyalty, Governor. The governor scoffed. My men know exactly which crates hold the powder. We will just be careful where we spill your blood. Kill them. The mercenaries surged forward, their battle cries echoing off the high wooden rafters. Gao! Protect Lady Zhao! Lu roared. Then the executioner was unleashed. Lu drew his saber, the steel singing in the humid air. He met the front line of mercenaries with a devastating fluid violence that was breathtaking to witness. He didn't just fight. He systematically dismantled the opposition, his blade moving with the precise, lethal syntax of a master. Gao and the dozen shadow guards formed a tight, impenetrable circle around me and the powder crates. The clash of steel was deafening. Blood sprayed across the wooden floorboards, but no mercenary could break Lu's defensive line. Seeing his men falling rapidly to the shadow guards, the governor panicked. He realized he couldn't win a battle of steel against Commander Lu. Burn it! The governor screamed, his face twisting into a mask of pure desperation. He snatched a torch from a falling mercenary and lunged forward, aiming not for Lu, but for the stack of crates I was standing beside. If I fall, the port burns with me. He threw the torch directly toward the gunpowder. Time seemed to fracture. The flaming brand tumbled through the air, casting wild shadows across the crates. If it struck the wood, the entire warehouse and half the harbor would be vaporized. I didn't cower. I didn't calculate. I acted. I threw off my heavy cloak, lunging forward with my abacus. I swung the solid ironwood frame of the counting tool like a bat, striking the heavy burning end of the torch mid-air. The impact sent a violent shock up my arms, shattering 3 of the wooden counting rods, but the trajectory of the torch was completely violently altered. It deflected off the abacus and flew harmlessly into a stack of legitimate, tightly packed tea bricks across the aisle, sputtering out in a cloud of dried leaves. Before the governor could even comprehend what had happened, Lu was there. A blur of dark leather and silver steel crossed the distance in a fraction of a second. Lu drove the heavy pommel of his saber directly into the governor's temple. The corrupt official collapsed to the floorboards like a puppet with its strings cut, entirely unconscious. The remaining mercenaries, seeing their employer fall and facing the terrifying wrath of the shadow guards, immediately dropped their weapons and raised their hands in surrender. The silence that slammed into the warehouse was deafening, broken only by the heavy, ragged breathing of the guards. I stood staring at my broken abacus, my hands shaking violently as the adrenaline began to crash. Lu sheathed his saber and crossed the distance between us in 3 massive strides. He dropped to his knees right in front of me, entirely ignoring the blood on the floorboards, and pulled me fiercely into his chest. You insane, brilliant woman, Lu breathed, his voice raw. He buried his face in my neck, holding me so tightly I could feel the frantic hammering of his heart against my own. You parried a firebrand with an abacus. It was structurally sound iron wood, Commander. I whispered, wrapping my arms tightly around his broad shoulders, burying my face in the curve of his neck. And I refused to let an administrative error destroy a perfectly good port. Lou let out a choked, desperate laugh, pulling back just enough to frame my face in his large, calloused hands. His dark eyes were burning with an intensity that completely eclipsed the danger we had just faced. "The audit is complete, Rong," Lou murmured, his thumbs gently tracing my cheekbones. "Then the balance is settled," I replied, a soft smile finally breaking through the shock. Lou didn't wait another second. He pulled me down into a fierce, consuming kiss right there in the middle of the bloodied warehouse, surrounded by stolen tea and gunpowder. It was a promise sealed in the dark that no matter how many corrupt ledgers the Empire produced, the executioner and his auditor would balance them all. Together. Chapter 13. The aftermath of the Pearl River raid sent a shockwave through the Yen dynasty that completely permanently reorganized the imperial power structure. With the southern governor executed for treason and the pirate syndicate's gunpowder reserves at the bottom of the harbor, the emperor granted the Obsidian Pavilion unprecedented jurisdiction over the empire's finances. I was no longer just the chief imperial auditor. I was the financial blade of the secret police. My new offices were located in the highest tower of the pavilion, flooded with natural light and lined with walls of meticulously organized scrolls. "The Eastern Salt magistrates have submitted their quarterly reports, my lady," a bright, brisk voice announced. I looked up from my desk as my cousin Jian and I marched into the study carrying a precarious stack of wooden lockboxes. Following my father's pardon, our family's nobility had been restored, and I had immediately requisitioned Jian and I to be my head researcher. She possessed a mind nearly as terrifyingly sharp as my own, though she hid it behind a cheerful, disarming smile that absolutely terrified the shadow guards. Jian and I dropped the lockboxes onto the desk with a heavy thud. I already cross-referenced their reported yields with the harbor tax logs. They are skimming exactly 3%. They think because it's a single-digit margin, you won't notice. "A thief who steals a single grain of rice is still a thief," I murmured, picking up my newly commissioned abacus. It was crafted from polished black ironwood, a gift from Commander Liu after I had shattered my last one over a firebrand. "Send a missive to the Eastern magistrates. Tell them if the 3% is not accounted for by the end of the week, I will send the vanguard to audit them in person." Jian and I grinned, her eyes sparkling with absolute delight. "I will draft the threat immediately." Oh, and Lieutenant Gao left the requisition forms for the new winter armor on the side table. He looked very nervous. "I think he's afraid you're going to reject the budget for the fur linings." "I only reject frivolous spending," I said, dipping my brush into the inkstone. "The vanguard cannot defend the capital if they freeze to death. Approve the fur linings, but tell him to source the pelts from the northern merchant guilds directly. The middlemen in the capital are marking up the prices by 20%. "Consider it done," Jian and I said, bowing crisply before turning toward the door. She paused, glancing out the large window overlooking the central courtyard. A sly, knowing smile touched her lips. "And it appears you have an appointment that is not on the ledger, Lady Zhao." Before I could ask what she meant, the heavy oak doors of the study opened. Commander Liu stepped into the room. He was dressed in his formal dark crimson-trimmed armor, his silver guan catching the morning light. The sheer, overwhelming presence of the head of the secret police instantly made the massive study feel dangerously intimate. Jian and I smoothly slipped past him, offering a perfectly respectful bow that failed to hide her entirely amused expression, and closed the doors behind her. Liu stood in the center of the room, his hands clasped behind his back, his dark eyes fixed entirely on me. "I was not aware we had a meeting scheduled, Commander," I noted, though my heart was already picking up its familiar, frantic rhythm at the sight of him. "I am not here for an audit, Rong," Liu said, his voice a low, gravelly rumble that sent a shiver straight down my spine. He walked around the edge of the rosewood desk, stopping just beside my chair. He reached into the breast of his dark tunic and withdrew a small, exquisite box carved from pure white jade. He set it gently on the ledger I had been reviewing. I set my brush down, my breath catching in my throat as I looked at the box. I slowly reached out and opened the silver clasp. Resting on a bed of dark velvet was an imperial seal, but it was not the bronze square of a magistrate, nor the silver crest of a minister. It was carved from flawless black obsidian, intricately detailed with the coiled dragon of the royal court, and inlaid with gold. It was the secondary seal of the Obsidian Pavilion. It was the mark of a commander's equal. "Lu," I whispered, looking up at him entirely stunned. "This is... The Emperor has to approve a dual command. It requires weeks of petitioning." "I did not petition," Lu stated simply, resting his heavy hand on the back of my chair. "I informed the Emperor that the Shadow Guards now operate with 2 blades, one of steel and one of sums. I told him I would not command the vanguard without you at my side." He leaned down, his face inches from mine, the familiar, intoxicating scent of sandalwood and cold iron wrapping around me. The fierce, territorial heat in his eyes was absolute. "I have spent my entire life in the dark, Xiao Rong," Lu whispered, his thumb gently tracing the line of my jaw. "You walked into my pavilion, balanced my ledgers, and gave me a reason to survive the fire. I do not just want you to audit my empire. I want you to rule it with me." The strict, professional walls of the ministry completely dissolved. I looked into the eyes of the most dangerous man in the Yin dynasty and saw nothing but a profound, unyielding devotion. "The math is heavily in our favor, Commander," I murmured, a soft smile breaking across my face. I reached up, wrapping my arms around his neck and pulled him down. Lu kissed me with the same devastating, consuming intensity he applied to everything he loved. It was a kiss that held the weight of 100 survived battles and the promise of 1,000 more. He pulled me up from the chair, wrapping his arms securely around my waist, entirely ignoring the scattered tax reports and ink brushes on the desk. The Empire would always have corrupt men, and the ledgers would always require balancing. But as I stood in the sunlight of the obsidian pavilion, held tightly in the arms of the Emperor's executioner, I knew with absolute mathematical certainty that my sum was finally complete.